My friends, for centuries you have read the scriptures, you have heard the teachings repeated, explained, argued over, preached from pulpits and whispered in private prayer, and yet the simplest, most transformative revelation Jesus ever offered stands before humanity as plainly as sunlight and still remains unseen. There is a truth so close, so obvious, so deeply woven into the fabric of your being that the mind passes it by without recognition, a truth so simple that the intellect dismisses it, and yet so profound that the entire spiritual life depends upon it. It is not hidden in ancient scrolls, nor buried in esoteric doctrines. It is written, spoken, repeated, but almost never understood. Jesus gave it in a single breath. 5 words. 5 words that, when entered into with awareness, dissolve fear, heal the body, supply every need, and restore the soul to its rightful identity. I and the Father are one. These words are not a statement about Jesus. They are a revelation of your true nature. They are not theology. They are not metaphor. They are not poetry. They are the spiritual fact of existence, stated plainly from one who lived in the light of realization, and yet with all the reading, all the praying, all the searching, you have rarely been shown how to receive this truth, how to enter it, how to recognize it as the living presence within yourself. These 5 words have been recited by millions, believed by some, admired by others, but revealed only to the few who dared to look behind the veil of appearance. You see, the world has trained you to believe in separation, a God somewhere above, a self somewhere below, a life to be managed, a world to be feared, needs to be met through effort, fear, and striving. But Jesus, standing in the quiet authority of spiritual awareness, shattered that illusion with 5 simple words, not to exalt himself, but to awaken you. When I tell you that this sentence is a code, do not think of mysticism or secrecy. Think instead of a key placed in your hand, waiting only for recognition, a key that unlocks the inner kingdom Jesus spoke of, a kingdom not found in time, not found in space, but found in consciousness, your consciousness, when it becomes still enough to hear the whisper of its own divine origin. Joel Goldsmith discovered this truth not through belief, not through study, but through experience, and he spent his life showing earnest seekers that this code, I and the Father are one, is not to be repeated mechanically, not to be forced through willpower, but to be entered into gently, reverently, as though stepping across the threshold of the infinite. Tonight, before you sleep, I will invite you to hold these words in the quiet of your heart, not to get something, not to change something, but simply to recognize what already is. For when you recognize oneness, you do not transform the world. You dissolve the illusion that the world ever stood apart from the source. You may have read the scriptures many times, but until this recognition dawns within you, you have not read them with awakened eyes. You may have prayed countless prayers, but until the sense of separation is surrendered, prayer remains an effort of the mind rather than an activity of the spirit. This simple code, my friends, is the gateway to Christ consciousness. Not a higher state to achieve, not a distant light to pursue, but the natural awareness of one who has realized that there is no I separate from God, no life separate from divine life, no mind separate from divine mind. Let us begin this journey together calmly, quietly, without strain. Let us approach these 5 words not as students seeking information, but as consciousness seeking its own source. For the kingdom you seek is not far. It is not hidden. It is not withheld. It is here where you are. It is now, in this very moment, and it waits only for recognition. My friends, the spiritual world has spent 2,000 years debating who Jesus was, what authority he held, and what his words were meant to convey. But very few have paused long enough, become still enough, silent enough, to perceive the consciousness from which he spoke when Jesus uttered the words, "I and the Father are one." He was not describing a belief he cherished. He was not asserting a doctrine. He was speaking from an actual state of realization, a lived awareness of the presence that animated his being. These words came not from thought, but from illumination, not from intellect, but from spiritual vision, not from effort, but from revelation. Jesus stood in the full light of truth, and from that light he spoke. And because he spoke from consciousness, his words carried the authority of consciousness. That is why they have endured across centuries, not because of theological interpretation, but because spiritual truth contains its own life, its own power, its own resonance. Now listen closely. When Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," he was not claiming a unique privilege. He was not saying, "I alone am one with God, and you are not." That was never his message. That was never his consciousness. He was revealing the eternal truth of all spiritual identity. He was showing you what is true of you, even if you do not yet recognize it. Joel Goldsmith often said, Jesus was not setting himself apart. He was showing you your own self. The Master knew that every healing, every supply, every harmony that appeared in his ministry flowed not from a personal power, but from his recognition of oneness with the infinite source. He never claimed credit. He never pointed to a human self. He said plainly, "The Father within me, he doeth the works." If this is the same consciousness expressed in 5 words, "I and the Father are one." To understand the origin of the code, you must understand this. Jesus spoke these words from the mountaintop of spiritual realization. They were not a step on the path. They were the summit. And when you touch even for a moment the awareness from which he spoke, something within you awakens. Something that has always been true, always been present, but has slept beneath the noise of human thought. You see, separation exists only in belief. Oneness exists in reality. Jesus did not create oneness, he recognized it. And in that recognition, the world of appearances lost its authority. The storm could not threaten him. Disease could not bind him. Lack could not frighten him. Death itself could not hold him. Why? Because he lived from the awareness of the invisible presence that governs all visible form. Joel Goldsmith taught that Jesus' secret was not supernatural ability, but spiritual identity. The Master saw the universe not as a collection of separate forces, but as an expression of one life, one intelligence, one substance. And so when he spoke those 5 words, he spoke them from the only place where they have meaning, conscious union with God. This is why the phrase is powerless when repeated by the mind, yet infinitely powerful when recognized by the heart. The words are a door, but the consciousness behind them is the kingdom. And so, my friends, tonight, when you rest in these words, you will not be repeating a historical statement. You will be touching the same consciousness from which Jesus spoke. You will be returning to the origin, not of the phrase, but of your being, for the truth he revealed is the truth of every soul. I and the Father are one. This is not a future attainment. It is not a reward for spiritual growth. It is not a condition to be earned. It is the eternal fact of your existence, waiting for you to awaken to it. And this awakening begins with recognition. My friends, we have taken sacred words and turned them into habits. We have taken revelation and turned it into recitation. We have taken the living truth of spiritual identity and reduced it to phrases repeated without consciousness. But a truth repeated is not a truth realized. A truth memorized is not a truth awakened. A truth spoken from the mind is not the same as a truth known in the heart. And so Joel Goldsmith, standing within the same stream of spiritual insight that moved through the Master's consciousness, said something very few were able to understand. You cannot make truth true. Truth already is. You see, my friends, most people treat spiritual statements as affirmations, tools for convincing themselves, persuading themselves, or reshaping reality according to personal desire. But the infinite way does not work in that realm at all. When Jesus said, I and the Father are one, he was not affirming, he was recognizing. Affirmation belongs to the human mind. Recognition belongs to spiritual consciousness. Affirmation tries to make something happen. Recognition reveals what already is. Affirmation begins with separation and attempts to build a bridge. Recognition begins with oneness and rests in it. So when you take these 5 words and attempt to use them as a mantra, as a device to get healing, or supply, or peace, you have already stepped away from the consciousness that gave them life. You have turned a revelation into a tool for personal improvement. You have slipped unconsciously into seeking second. As Joe would say, listen carefully, for this is the turning point. Truth does not respond to effort. It reveals itself to awareness. And so Joel Goldsmith urged his students, do not repeat these words mechanically. Do not attempt to believe them. Do not try to force your mind into agreement. Instead, be still, rest, listen. Let the words open a space within you, for the power is not in the syllables. The power is in the consciousness behind them. If you take the phrase, I and the Father are one, and repeat it 100 times, it will mean nothing. But if you sit quietly, gently, reverently, and let the inner meaning dawn, even for a breath, even for a moment, you have touched eternity. You have felt the presence. You have recognized the truth of being, Joel would often say. One moment of true awareness is more powerful than hours of meditation performed by the mind. Because spiritual truth is not something you create. It is not something you manufacture. It is not something you achieve. It is something you recognize. Let us make this clear. Recognition is not concentration. Recognition is not willpower. Recognition is not effort. Recognition is surrender. Recognition is openness. Recognition is the dissolving of the personal sense of I. When the personal I surrenders, even slightly, the divine I, the infinite identity, reveals itself. And in that revelation, the words I and the Father are one become alive. They stop being a phrase and they become your state of consciousness. This is why Joel called this approach radical, because it bypasses the mind entirely. It bypasses technique. It bypasses striving. It bypasses the ego's desire to use truth as a tool. It leaves only presence, only awareness. Only the silent recognition of what has always been true. When you speak these words tonight, do not speak them outwardly. Do not say them as though they are addressed to the universe. Do not direct them toward a God beyond the skies. Simply rest in them, as though sinking into the truth of your own being. Say them without saying. Hear them without sound. Know them without thought. Let the words reveal themselves. Let the truth find you. Let the recognition rise of its own accord. For when recognition arises, it brings peace, it brings clarity, it brings the quiet assurance that you are not alone, not separate, not vulnerable, not impoverished, not abandoned. You are one with the source, not by effort, not by achievement, not by belief, by truth itself. And truth needs only to be recognized. My beloved friends, when the Master declared, "I and the Father are one," he was not speaking poetry. He was describing the structure of reality itself, the invisible relationship that governs all visible experience. And until you understand this relationship, until it becomes your own lived awareness, you will continue to struggle with the problems of the world, as though they possess power, as though they possess cause, as though they possess reality. Now listen, and listen deeply. Every material problem, every fear, every disease, every lack, every conflict arises from one root, the belief that you stand separate from the source of life. Separation is the only illusion mankind has ever suffered. Separation is the only cause of anxiety, the only cause of insufficiency, the only cause of spiritual darkness. The moment you believe you live apart from the infinite, you begin to depend on finite resources, finite strength, finite understanding, and finiteness always fails. This is why the world struggles, not because it is bad, not because it is fallen, but because it is believed to be separate. The human mind looks at a problem, whether it be debt or illness or fear, and immediately concludes something out there must change. It seeks to fix the outer world. It seeks to rearrange matter. It seeks to manipulate circumstances. And all the while, the root remains untouched. Joel Goldsmith taught a truth so profound, so revolutionary, so simple, that many overlooked it. The outer world is never cause. Consciousness alone is cause. Do you see this significance? The moment you treat a material condition as power, you strengthen it. The moment you fight an appearance, you grant it reality. The moment you chase a solution outside, you affirm separation. But when the Master spoke those 5 words, "I and the Father are one," he pulled the entire axis of life inward. He recognized the presence that stands behind all form, the infinite that animates all manifestation. He saw that the source of supply is not money. The source of health is not the body. The source of protection is not human strength. The source of harmony is not human personalities. The source is the Father, the infinite presence, the invisible consciousness that lives as you. And so Joel would say, when you understand oneness, the problem dissolves not because you fixed it, but because it never had reality apart from belief. Let us take this slowly. When you stand in awareness of oneness, fear loses its foundation because you no longer stand alone. Lack loses its authority because supply is realized as spiritual, not material. Illness loses its terror because life is recognized as divine, not biological. Conflict loses its heat because identity is seen as spiritual, not personal. Nothing external changes first. Consciousness changes. And because consciousness is cause, the world reflects that change. This, my friends, is the spiritual law Jesus lived by. He did not heal by manipulating matter. He did not create supply by controlling conditions. He did not calm storms by overpowering nature. He lived from the awareness, I and the Father are one. Therefore nothing can oppose me, nothing can threaten me, nothing can separate me from the infinite. This awareness, this recognition neutralizes the world's claims of power. And when the claim is neutralized, harmony appears of its own accord. Joel Goldsmith used to say that the moment you recognize oneness, the problem begins to dissolve, not because you have solved it, but because you have withdrawn the only thing that sustained it. The belief in separation. When you are one with the Father, supply flows naturally, guidance comes effortlessly, the body responds to truth, relationships soften and heal, fear fades like mist in sunlight, not through effort, not through striving, not through will, through recognition. This is why the 5-word code is so powerful, not as a statement, but as a state of consciousness. When you rest in I and the Father are one, you return to the truth of your being, and in that truth, the world loses its power over you, not because you have conquered it, but because you have awakened from the dream that it ever had power at all. This is the inner mechanics of oneness. This is the invisible law behind harmony. This is the secret Jesus lived, and the truth Joel revealed. Oneness dissolves problems because oneness dissolves the illusion that gave birth to them. When you remember this, your entire life begins to shift, not bit by bit, but at the root, my friends. If you have listened with an open heart, you have already begun to feel it, the hush of something deeper, the nearness of something sacred, the subtle stirring of a presence that does not come from the world, but from within you. And so now, let us prepare for the practice that Jesus himself offered, and that Joel Goldsmith devoted his life to opening for all who sought truth sincerely. This practice is not a ritual, not a technique, not an exercise in concentration. It is a return, a homecoming, a remembrance. You will enter it tonight before you sleep, because the moments before sleep are among the most spiritually receptive moments of your day. The body grows quiet, the mind relaxes, the habitual resistance begins to loosen, the surface thoughts begin to fall away. And in that inward softening, consciousness becomes tender, open, receptive to truth. This is why Joel often encouraged his students, fall asleep in truth, not in fear, for the state in which you drift into rest imprints itself upon your consciousness, shaping the tone of the inner life. And so tonight, we begin gently. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to force, nothing to make happen. You simply become still. Find a place where you can sit or lie down without hurry. Let your hands rest. Let your breath settle. Let the concerns of the day fall from your shoulders. Do not try to silence the mind. Do not push thoughts away. Do not make effort. The presence does not enter because you make room for it. It is already here. Now, when you feel even a small measure of quietness, when the pace of the mind softens just a little, bring the sacred code into your awareness, not as affirmation, not as command, not as repetition. Bring it into your consciousness as a whisper of truth. I and the Father are one. Speak it inwardly once, then become still. Let the words hang there like incense rising into silence. Feel the sense of I, not the personal I, not the I of history and memory, not the I of fear or desire. Feel the pure awareness that exists before, thought your own being aware of itself. Then gently acknowledge the Father, not a God outside, not a deity above, but the infinite presence, the life that breathes you, the intelligence that sustains you, the love that has never once left you. And then, softly, allow the final phrase to open within you, are one. Do not think about it. Do not try to believe it. Do not analyze its meaning. Just let it rest in you. Let it unfold. Let it reveal itself. If thoughts arise, let them pass like birds crossing the sky. If emotions rise, let them be. If doubts whisper, do not engage them. Simply return without struggle to the quiet awareness behind the words, I and the Father are one. Feel it. Not as a concept, but as a presence. For a moment, a single moment, let yourself lean into the possibility that this is true. Let yourself feel even faintly the reality that these words describe what you already are. And then, my friends, do nothing more. Do not attempt to go deeper. Do not strain for mystical experience. Do not look for visions or sensations. Truth comes not through effort, but through surrender. Let the words carry you towards sleep. Let them dissolve the day's concerns. Let them wrap you in the assurance that you are not separate, not alone, not cut off from the infinite. Fall asleep tonight in the awareness, even if delicate, even if subtle, that the very presence that breathed life into Jesus breathes life into you. There is no distance to cross, no separation to heal, no barrier to overcome. You are one. You have always been one. You will forever be one. And when you rest in this, even for a breath, the kingdom begins to reveal itself. This is the practice. Simple, quiet, transformative, not because you made anything happen, but because you stopped interfering with what already is. Tonight, let the code work on you. Let it awaken what has long slept. Let it dissolve the walls the mind has built. Let it return you to the truth of your being. My friends, let us turn our attention now to the silent, sacred work that takes place within you when the truth behind those 5 words begins to dawn, not in the intellect, not in imagination, but in consciousness itself. For when you rest in the awareness, I and the Father are one, something begins to shift deep beneath the surface of the mind, something subtle, something quiet, yet infinitely powerful. You may not see anything outward at first, and that is perfectly right. For spiritual transformation begins at the root, not at the branches. It begins where no eye can see, where no hand can touch, where no human effort can interfere. This inner movement is the activity of the Spirit. Now listen gently. The first thing that happens when recognition dawns is that the personal sense of I begins to soften. The heavy, burdened I that tries, fights, strives, fears, worries, and seeks begins to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. You will feel, perhaps for the first time, that you are not carrying life alone. You are not depending on your own strength. You are not responsible for orchestrating the universe. Something deeper is holding you. This is not imagination. It is recognition. Joel Goldsmith called it the dissolving of the personal self, not the destruction of individuality, but the release of the false sense of separation. When this begins, a great quietness enters your being. Not the quietness created by effort, but the quietness that flows naturally when fear loses its foundation. Fear can only survive in separation. Fear cannot survive in oneness. And so when you recognize your unity with the infinite presence, fear begins to lose its voice. It may try to rise, it may whisper its familiar arguments, but something within you knows that it has no authority. Then another change begins to unfold. The mind stops reaching outward for solutions. It stops calculating. It stops grasping. It stops trying to fix, repair, or manipulate conditions. This is the beginning of spiritual rest. Not lethargy, not passive acceptance, but the deep awareness that there is a presence and intelligence, a life moving through you, living as you, governing every detail of your existence. Joel often said, the moment you stop trying to make life happen, the Spirit takes over. And that, my friends, is what you will begin to feel. Life happening through you rather than you happening to life. Another inner shift takes place as well, one more delicate, yet profoundly transformative. The sense of being guided, not by thoughts, not by logic, not by emotion, but by a quiet prompting, an inner nudge, a subtle clarity that reveals the next step without strain. This guidance is not external. It is not a voice speaking from beyond. It is the natural activity of the Father, the infinite consciousness, moving as your own awareness, as recognition deepens. You will also notice that your reactions begin to change. What once startled you no longer shakes you. What once angered you no longer ignites you. What once frightened you no longer terrifies you. Not because conditions have changed yet, but because the center from which you live has shifted. You are no longer responding from personality. You are responding from presence. And then, very quietly, another inner transformation unfolds, one that cannot be forced, one that cannot be sought, one that arises only through grace, a sense of fullness. Not emotional excitement, not positive thinking, not an improved mood, but a deep, steady, quiet contentment, untouched by circumstances. This fullness is the first sign that the Christ within you is stirring, moving, rising to the surface of your awareness. It is the inner assurance that you lack nothing because the source is within your own being. From this fullness, harmony begins to express itself outwardly, naturally, without effort, without manipulation. But remember this, the outer harmony is not the miracle. The inner recognition is the miracle. For when you recognize oneness, the world becomes a reflection of that recognition, not because you changed the world, but because you awakened from the belief that the world had power separate from God. This quiet, powerful inner unfolding is what happens when the code is realized, not repeated, not memorized, not affirmed, recognized, and recognition, my friends, is the true foundation of spiritual transformation. My dear friends, before we move deeper, we must pause and shine light on a tender truth, one that Joel Goldsmith spoke often and always. With compassion, most people never experience the power behind the words, I and the Father are one, because they approach it from the wrong level of consciousness. They recite it with sincerity. They speak it with longing. They repeat it with devotion, but they do not realize it. And the reason is not lack of faith, nor lack of purity, nor lack of spiritual desire. The reason is that three subtle obstacles, so subtle they often go unnoticed, stand between the mind and the revelation of inner oneness. Let us bring these obstacles into the light together, gently, without judgment. Obstacle 1, using the code to get something. This is the most common and the most human. The mind says, if I repeat this truth, my life will improve, my body will be healed, my bills will be paid, my problems will dissolve. But, my friends, the moment you use truth to improve the human picture, you have already stepped away from the consciousness that Jesus lived in. You have shifted from recognition to utilization, from oneness to separation, from spirit to desire. Jesus did not speak the words to obtain anything. He spoke them from the fullness of already being. Joel Goldsmith said it without compromise. Truth cannot be used. Truth must be lived. When you take these 5 words and try to make them a tool, the personal I, the one that wants, fears, and grasps, steps forward. And where the personal I stands, the Christ cannot be recognized. So release the desire to use the code. Let the words be what they are, a revelation of what already is. Obstacle 2, mental repetition without inner surrender. Many people repeat the phrase, sometimes hundreds of times, believing that if they say it enough, they will eventually feel its truth. But spiritual realization does not come by force. It does not respond to repetition. It does not obey volume or persistence. It comes by quietness, by yielding, by letting go of the mind's effort to grasp or understand. You cannot think your way into oneness. You cannot argue your way into union. You cannot demand spiritual vision from the intellect. The mind does not awaken the spirit awakens you. Joel taught this with unwavering clarity. One moment of surrendered awareness is worth more than hours of mental effort. So if you find yourself repeating the words anxiously, mechanically, nervously, stop, become still, breathe once, and let the words sink inward, not outward. Let the truth reveal itself. Instead of trying to manufacture it, obstacle 3, trying to believe the statement is true. This is a subtle trap. Many seekers approach the phrase like a belief to be accepted, a doctrine to be agreed with, a concept to be mentally absorbed. But belief belongs to the mind. Recognition belongs to consciousness. Belief can be shaken. Recognition cannot. Belief fluctuates with circumstances. Recognition stands immovable. Belief requires effort. Recognition is effortless. Belief tries to accept truth. Recognition sees truth. And so, my friends, stop trying to believe. Stop trying to convince yourself. Stop forcing the mind to accept what it cannot comprehend. The personal mind cannot understand oneness because it was born from the illusion of separation. It tries, it struggles, it wrestles, but it cannot enter the kingdom. Only in inner silence, only in surrender, only in stillness does truth reveal itself. Joel Goldsmith's gentle reminder guides us here. You do not bring God into consciousness. You become aware that God is already there. The moment you stop trying to believe, the moment you stop trying to force truth inward, the moment you stop thinking about the words, a quiet recognition begins to arise, not from the mind, from the depth of your being, releasing the obstacles. And now, my friends, let me tell you the mercy of it all. These obstacles require no battle, no discipline, no effort. Simply becoming aware of them begins to dissolve them. Awareness itself is the dissolving agent. The moment you see that you are using truth, you stop. The moment you notice the mind repeating mechanically, it grows quiet. The moment you realize you are trying to believe, the trying falls away, and in that falling away, in that gentle surrender, the light has room to enter. Then, and only then, can the 5-word code begin to reveal its hidden power, not as a tool, not as a belief, not as an affirmation, but as your very identity, my friends. Up to this point, we have spoken of the sacred code as something you rest in during meditation, reflection, or the quiet moments before sleep. But now we come to the heart of the infinite way, the living of truth, the embodiment of awareness, the practice of presence in the moments that seem least spiritual, for spiritual realization is not meant to be confined to a cushion, nor locked within a sacred hour of silence. It must enter the marketplace, the workplace, the home, the conversation, the conflict. It must become your atmosphere, your foundation, your state of being. If the truth I and the Father are one is only known in stillness but forgotten in movement, then it is not yet realized. Joel Goldsmith said often, "Truth must be practiced, not occasionally, but as the way you walk through the world." Let us see then how this recognition becomes the living influence that shapes your day, not through effort, but through remembrance. When you wake in the morning, before your mind rushes into planning, before the concerns of yesterday return, before you reach for your phone or your tasks, pause for one breath, a single breath of awareness, and let this truth arise. I and the Father are one. Feel it not as words, but as inner alignment. Then rise and move into your day, not as a person seeking God, but as consciousness expressing God. This alone changes the texture of your entire morning. When problems appear, they will appear. The world of appearances does not cease simply because you have tasted reality. But now your response is different. When a problem presents itself, money, health, relationship, fear, do not rush to fix it, explain it, analyze it, or fear it. Learn to pause. Just a breath, just a moment. And in that pause, let the sacred recognition rise. I and the Father are one. Not to change the problem, not to manipulate conditions, but to remember who stands here. When you do this sincerely, something extraordinary happens. The personal self does not step forward. The divine presence does. The problem loses its authority because you are no longer meeting it as a limited being. You are meeting it from the consciousness that knows no limitation. Joel used to say, "Let God go before you. Do not go before God." This is how you let God go before you, by pausing, remembering, recognizing when you feel fear or uncertainty. Fear arises only when you believe you stand alone. When fear comes, it is not a sign of failure. It is an invitation to remembrance. Do not fight fear. Do not argue with it. Do not condemn yourself for feeling it. Simply turn inward and rest, even for 1 second, in the truth, I and the Father are one. In that instant, the foundation shifts. Fear loses its ground because its ground was separation. Oneness dissolves the soil in which fear grows. Even if the emotion lingers, your identity has changed, and that changes everything. When people trigger you, this is where the practice becomes most transformative. When someone criticizes you, disappoints you, misunderstands you, or behaves in ways that stir your emotions, pause before reacting. Remember, I and the Father are one. And then take one step further. And this one, too, is one with the Father. This remembrance dissolves the personality barrier. You are no longer meeting their behavior. You are meeting their true identity. And even if they cannot recognize their own nature, your recognition creates the atmosphere in which harmony can unfold. Joel taught, see through the mask of personality to the presence behind the form. This is how spiritual relationships are born. When you are making decisions made from personal will often carry strain, but decisions made from oneness carry grace. When faced with a choice, big or small, pause, become quiet, and enter the awareness. I and the Father are one. The Father within me is the source of all wisdom. I need not decide alone. Do not rush. Let clarity arise. Sometimes it will come as a gentle nudge. Sometimes as a simple knowing. Sometimes as peace around one option and discomfort around another. But always it will come without strain. When you feel alone or separate, this is the most important remembrance. There will be days when the old sense of separation rises again, when the world appears heavy, when emotions cloud your sight. In those moments, do nothing but this. Become still, close your eyes if you can, and let the truth emerge from the depth of your being. I and the Father are one. Say it inwardly, feel it gently, rest in it. Even if you feel nothing, the recognition is working. Even if the mind resists, the truth is present. Even if the heart feels dry, oneness remains unchanged. Joel said, the presence is always present. Your awareness of it comes and goes, but the presence does not. Your only task is to return again and again, softly, humbly, lovingly. The day becomes the practice, and then something beautiful begins to happen. You no longer think of spiritual practice as an activity you perform. It becomes the atmosphere in which you live. The pauses become natural. The remembrance becomes automatic. The presence becomes steady. You discover that the Christ consciousness you once sought is the consciousness you are now living from. Not perfectly, not dramatically, not as some exalted experience, but quietly, consistently, genuinely. And from this place, life begins to unfold with less resistance, less fear, more grace, more harmony, more flow, not because the world has changed, but because the one who sees the world has awakened. This is living the code. This is letting Christ walk through your day. This is the infinite way. My beloved friends, we have walked together through a sacred remembrance, not a new teaching, not a modern idea, not a mystical novelty, but the timeless reality Jesus lived, and Joel devoted his life to revealing. And now we come to the close of this message, though not to the close of the journey. For spiritual truth does not end when the words end. It begins when the words fall into silence within you. What matters now is not what you have heard, but what you will remember. Not what you understand intellectually, but what you are willing to rest in. Not what you hope to achieve, but what you are ready to receive tonight. In the quiet moments before sleep, when the mind grows soft and the heart becomes receptive and the world loosens its grip, I invite you gently, lovingly, without pressure to take this truth into your consciousness. I and the Father are one. Do not repeat it as affirmation. Do not recite it as protection. Do not force it as belief. Let it arise in you like a whisper from your own soul. Let it settle like a feather landing on still water. Let it open like a flower blooming in darkness without making a sound. You do not have to feel anything. You do not have to enter a mystical state. You do not have to silence the mind or calm the emotions. Simply notice the awareness behind the words. Notice the gentle presence that has been listening to this message the entire time. Notice the stillness beneath all thought. That stillness is the Father. That awareness is the Christ. That union is your own being. Tonight, as you close your eyes, before sleep takes you, before dreams begin, rest in the simple, effortless truth. You are not separate. You are not alone. You have never been divided from the source of all life. You and the Father are one. Let those words cradle you. Let them carry you inward. Let them dissolve the day's weight. Let them reveal the presence that has always been waiting for your recognition. And if you drift into sleep with even the faintest awareness of this oneness, your night will be different. Your rest will be deeper. Your consciousness will be more open to the activity of spirit. For the moment you surrender into the truth begins to live you. This, my friends, is the beginning, not the end. The beginning of a life lived not as a seeker of God, but as an expression of God. Not as a person striving for spiritual experience, but as consciousness awakening to itself. Not as one hoping for peace, but as one resting in the peace that has always been within. And so I leave you with this quiet blessing. May the presence that breathes you be recognized by you. May the light within you become the light you live from. May the truth spoken by Jesus become the truth realized in you. I and the Father are one. Go into tonight's silence with this awareness. Let it follow you into sleep. Let it rise with you in the morning. Let it walk with you through your day. And in time, gently, quietly, inevitably, it will become the consciousness you live from and the life that lives through you. Peace be with you.